Good afternoon, just. I want to really talk about this in the context of the beginnings of STAMP and the beginnings of the project in terms of two things, really. The lack of adoption and recognition of what we do as being evidence-based and efficacious. That's one issue. But another issue is still the absence of individuals qualified to deliver the kind of provision that we're talking about, and that remains the case. So Simple Steps and STAMP were very much about bridging the gap where there was really not enough expertise in Europe, in Northern Ireland and in Europe to address these issues. And I think one of the issues in terms of the lack of adoption of and recognition of what we do is huge amounts of misinformation and inaccuracies about applied behaviour analysis as being an applied science or the application of science. So my preferred distinction is to talk about what we do in terms of behavioural intervention for autism, being one of many hundreds, if not thousands, of applications of applied behaviour analysis. So you have applied behaviour analysis and then behavioural intervention for autism, one of many, many applications, because one of the problems is that people will say, oh, applied behaviour analysis, that's just one of many therapies for children with autism. And that's one of the reasons why I think that it's not so recognised and so on. So behavioural intervention for autism is educational provision, and we can argue about the relative merits of education versus health and so on. Educational provision based on the principles and using the methodology of applied behaviour analysis. And this, Laurie's slides earlier that showed the recognition from the Surgeon General and so on, there are many individuals and organisations and associations that have made recommendations for the application of behaviour analysis being, if you like, a treatment methodology, educational provision of choice for children with autism. And one such recommendation comes from the special interest group of the Autism Special Interest Group of the Association for Behaviour Analysis International, who published this document in early 2000. It's been through several revisions, and it asserts very clearly that all children and adults with autism spectrum disorders have the right to effective education and treatment based on the best available scientific evidence. Now, how do we know what that is? How do we know what that looks like? Now, this is not something you can go and observe and say, that's ABA, that's not ABA. Fundamentally, what makes it ABA, what makes it behavioural intervention for autism in this context, is entirely defined by the individuals who are responsible for delivering it. The skills and competencies of those responsible, in other words, behaviour analysts. So it's not about what it is, it's about who's responsible for delivering it. Because actually what it is highly individualised. It's very difficult to compartmentalise and say, well, that obviously is ABA and that obviously is not. And these kinds of skills and competencies are not easily developed. This is not a 1 weekend or 2 weekend or 2 week training course. We are talking about advanced academic training within the science. So certainly not just a couple of workshops. We're also talking about extensive hands-on experience in the particular areas. And ultimately, to become a behaviour analyst and to be recognised as someone with the skills and abilities, that's evidenced through credentialing. And it's international credentialing that recognised in most countries, if not all countries around the world, is that through the Behaviour Analyst Certification Board. And it's not my intention to talk much about the BACB, but I do want to show you some data that kind of highlights the paucity of available expertise, particularly in Europe. So to become a board-certified behaviour analyst requires a degree component. It requires that one complete a certain amount of coursework, and it also requires that one have a certain amount of supervised experience. And then ultimately you take an examination and, of course, pass the examination. Now, here are the relatively latest data. The data from 2013 are actually not yet complete because there are 3 examination cycles throughout the year. But based on these data, we can see nice linear growth in the number of behaviour analysts worldwide that are credentialed by the BACB. And we're hoping that by the end of this year, there'll be close to 1,500, if not 15,000 or 16,000 certificates worldwide. Now, let's just put that in context. That was overall. Let's look at if we extract those that are certified from outside the US, these are the non-US certificates. Now, this is considerably less. This is something like 7% of the entire population of behaviour analysts worldwide outside the US, so much fewer. And if we break that down to where they reside, we can see that there are many countries that have very few behaviour analysts. Now this is the context behind STAMP and Simple Steps. This is why it was necessary to produce these materials for parents, where the expertise simply wasn't available in many places. I've highlighted in blue the European certificates, and there are 283 of us in Europe, which is a very small number. Very small number. Now let's set that against the number of training programs available to provide the coursework for these individuals to become credentialed. So there are just over 350 training programs worldwide, of which approximately 75, I think 74, are outside the US. Okay, so still considerably less. And if we break that down into where they actually are again, and the ones highlighted in blue, of which there are 40, you can see that there are many countries with just 1 or 2 training programs. Okay, so it's the absence of training programs, which is also a significant problem for us generally. So, STAMP and Simple Steps is a bridge, it's a gap where there may be no access to behaviour analysts, no access to training. STAMP provides some basic knowledge about our science and working with individuals with autism. It also helps provide general dissemination about what we do and about the science. And because we have it now in a number of different languages, we're in a nice position where we can disseminate that throughout Europe and beyond at some point. And I think because of that, it provides some impetus and interest in the science, interest in behaviour analysis and applied behaviour analysis, and potentially will generate more interest in terms of generating training programs and training opportunities throughout Europe. So it fulfills multiple functions. But the biggest barriers remain, and perhaps this is something that we could discuss more in the panel discussion later, misinformation and inaccuracies about our science. And they abound. They abound on websites, they abound through individuals in funding positions and government ministers and so on, making decisions about what we do without the facts and with a lot of misinformation. And then, as I pointed out, the lack of available expertise in many countries. And probably by far the biggest problem in terms of those who wish to become credentialed is in acquiring the supervision component. And that kind of leads back to the lack of available expertise and therefore the lack of people available to provide the supervision. So as I say, STAMP addresses this on many different levels. It provides parents with the information that they need to help them get started. It provides some impetus for people to gain an interest in the science and to think about further training opportunities and so on. So thank you very much. Parsimonious.